Hey guys, this is Andrew with rockclass101.com, and in this week's ukulele lesson, Matt's going to be teaching you a beautiful love song from Richard Marx called Right Here Waiting. Now this is one of my favorite tunes for years, simply because the melody is absolutely gorgeous throughout the entire song. So let's talk a little bit about it from a playing perspective, because I did get a chance to play through Matt's arrangement. I've got to say, it's a ton of fun. But secondly, I think it's going to be best suited for the intermediate player. So if that's where you're at, this should be a really great fingerstyle piece for you. So let's take a step back though, and let's talk a little bit about this lesson. So in this video, Matt's going to teach you the entire arrangement. But if you want to get the tabs to print off and follow along with, that's going to be available at this link. Or you can go to the site rockclass101.com and do a search for Right Here Waiting. Now also on that page will be the really cool interactive on-screen tab viewer. Now this is a great feature where you can hit play, you can watch the tab scroll across in real time, you can highlight bars to loop sections, slow it down to any speed you wish. Just a great asset in learning this song that much easier. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Matt to teach you how to play this. Don't forget to grab the high G ukulele, and I'll catch you at the end of the video.
Hello! In today's tutorial, we're going to be working on a solo high G ukulele arrangement of Right Here Waiting. Let's go and dive into the best part of the song, which is this intro and the super iconic riff. I'm going to bring the camera down. What we're going to start here with is we're going to just take our pinky finger and place it on the 10th fret of the A string to play this C chord. We're going to do an in to out pattern. Now, you can use either 3-finger picking or 4-finger picking with this, whatever is more comfortable. For a lot of the song, we're going to be using this. Later in the song, we're going to be using a thumb picking style. More on that when we get there, but 3 or 4-finger picking both work great. We're going to pluck the C string open, E, G, and then we're going to pluck the A string, and we're going to pluck that twice on that 10. Important to really enunciate those, because that is the melody, and the melody is going to maintain on this A string. When we go down to the 8th fret, now I like to use my middle finger here, and then the 7th fret with the index, and then the index slides down to the 5th fret, pluck that again. And those are melody notes, so we want those a little bit more pronounced. So that first measure in time sounds something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going into the second measure here, we're going to leave this index finger where it is on the 5th fret. We're going to take the middle finger, stack it onto the 7th fret of the C string. Take the ring finger, put it on the 7th fret of the E string. It's really helpful to point these fingers towards your right shoulder to help squeeze them into position. We're going to then hold this chord, and we're going to pluck the C string, E string, C string. Pluck the A string now twice. Squeeze that pinky in there underneath on the 7th fret. On the A string, slide it up to the 8th fret on the A string. And then for the very last note, we're going to play 7 on the A, but it's really important that you take this index finger and you slide it up 2 frets, taking the other fingers off to play it there. So that second measure in time looks and sounds something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And the reason it's so important to do this is because when we go on to this next measure here, we're going to see that we're going to be playing this chord shape for an A minor. It's kind of this A minor 7. We're going to take this ring finger and place it here on the 9th fret of the C string. We're going to pluck that. And then we're going to play open on the E string. Then we're going to play 8 on the E by taking that middle finger and adding it to the 8th fret of the E string. Play that twice. Take the pinky, add it on the 10th fret of the E string, play that. Then we're going to play the 7, which is still there with the index, so it should be sustaining this whole time. We're going to pluck that along with our open G string. So that measure 3, sounds something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going into the 4th measure now, we're going to maintain this same shape. We're going to pluck the 10 on the E string, so add that pinky back on. Take the pinky off, pluck the C and the E, which should be at 9 and 8 respectively. And then we're going to take all of our fingers off, except our middle finger, which is going to slide down 1 fret to fret 7, pluck that, then open on the A and open on the G. So that measure in time sounds something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And this is sort of that first phrase now. So let's go ahead and hear what that phrase sounds like. This is now measures 1, 2, 3, and 4, which honestly, if you learn this much of the song, you're going to really have a good time because it's really the iconic part. Sounds something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... From here we go on to measure 5. Good news, measure 5 is exactly the same as the first measure. And guess what? Measure 6 is exactly the same as the second measure. No fluctuation whatsoever. So we start with that same C chord into the same G chord. So in time, measures 5 and 6, exactly the same as 1 and 2. Should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Making sure we still go to that 7 with the index finger, because when you go to measure 7 now, it's exactly the same start as measure 3. We're going to start with the same 9 on the C, leaving the index here on 7 of the A. Play the same open E and the same 8 on the E string with the middle finger twice. But then it changes. And the way it's going to change here is we're going to play 5 on the A string with our index finger, sliding it down. And 7 on the A string with the ring finger. And then we're going to play this beautiful F chord by taking the pinky, adding on 8, and collapsing the index finger to bar across the 5th fret of the C, E, and A strings. We're going to pluck all 3 of those together. So that measure 7 sounds like this in time. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going to measure 8 here, excuse me. We're going to be still holding this, and we're going to be adding the 7th fret on the A string by taking the pinky off and putting the ring finger on. And actually, I recommend doing it the opposite way. Put the ring finger on, then take the pinky off. It helps get you good sustain. We're going to play that note. Then we're going to play this fun G7 by just taking that ring finger and moving it up 1 string. So it's on the 7th fret now of the E string. We're going to pluck our C, E, and A together there. And then after we've done that, we're going to play the 8 on the E with the pinky. And then the 7 on the E by just holding that ring finger where it was. And then the pinky on 8 of the E again. So measure 8 in time should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And now measures 7 and 8 should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And then to wrap up this section, we've got measure 9 and 10, which are actually identical bars. And all that's going to be is take everything off, play open on the C, open on the E, open on the A. Doesn't get much easier than that, right? But then you're going to reapply the middle finger on the 2nd fret of the A string. And then you're going to play 3 on the A with the ring finger. So all that is... And that's going to be the same for both 9 and 10, which is kind of neat. So here's what 9 and 10 sound like together. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And so that you can hear it, here's that super iconic intro part. This is now measures 1 through 10, which honestly, most fun part of the song. And we're going to play this 2 more times, basically. So really important to get comfortable with it. Should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... One quick note is the melody is sort of interlaced here with the harmony. So prioritize those melody sequences, the notes of... Play those notes louder and you'll find more success with the arrangement. It's kind of getting the comfort with layering them that makes this such a cool, difficult exercise. But now that we've heard melody A, let's go on to melody B. So this is going to be the verse, and this is going to be another nice section, but we are going to be switching to thumb picking. So go ahead and use your thumb. I like to use what's called a rest stroke for the most part with this, and all that means is when you can, you rest on whatever the next string is. So when you pluck the G, it rests on the C. When you pluck the C, it rests on the E. When you pluck the E, it rests on the A. When you pluck the A, well, there's nothing for it to rest on, but you kind of imagine that it is. It's the same sort of concept. It gets a nice buttery tone. To start here, we're going to play a C5 chord. To play that, just take your index and bar it across the 3rd fret of the E and the A strings and strum all the way through. Then we're going to play the G string, A string. Then we're going to play the A string again with the ring finger here to the 5th fret. And then we're going to play this sort of G7 alternate way of playing it by taking the middle finger and adding it to the 5th fret of the C string. Tilt these fingernails so that they're pointed towards your shoulder. That can really help make it so that you get enough clearance when you're getting a good tone. So that measure in time is something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going into the next measure here on measure 12, still holding the shape, we're going to add 7 on the A with the pinky, stretching it out. We're going to play that 7 again, and we're going to play the 5 by taking the pinky off, but see how the other fingers are still on. We're going to play 3 on the A by taking the ring finger off, but this index, remember we barred it earlier with that C5? If we keep the bar going there, then we just need to play that string by itself. For the end of this bar, a little bit tricky, take this index and slide it over to the 5th fret and bar across the C, E, and A. So you kind of have to move it up one string as you do that. Some practice will get that movement. You're going to play through that D minor chord. So in time, that's going to sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Let's go on to measure 13 here so we can get a good idea of how this is all going to sound as a phrase. We're going to play 8 on the E string with our pinky here, and we're going to immediately pull it off to 5 on the E. Now, because this pull off is so fast, we don't need a super precise technique with the pull off. Normally, we want to actually physically pluck the string with the pinky, but because it's so fast, it's okay to just let the surface tension of the finger create that sound by just removing it quickly, whatever gives you the best success. But after we've played that, we're then going to play open on the A, and then 2 on the A. So really boring measure, right? It's important to note that while this is a very specific rhythm that's written here on the screen, this is very subjective. Just play how you hear the vocal melody singing with this. Don't worry about getting a perfect count on these E's and U's. Just worry about making it sound lyrical and like the melody. And so that you can hear it though, in time, it's something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Then going into the 14th bar, we're going to play this wonderful G7 sus4. I love this chord. So play a G7 as you normally do. Middle finger on the 2nd fret of the C string, index on the 1st fret of the E string, and the ring finger here on the 2nd fret of the A. But then just turn the hand so that instead of the nails kind of going towards the right shoulder, which helps you kind of squeeze these fingers in, instead tilt them more straight up and down. And you'll notice that ring finger naturally will kick out to give you that 3rd fret on the A string. We're going to strum through all 4 strings. And then we're going to add the pinky on 5 of the A. And then we're going to play a G7 chord, which we just talked about. We're going to play open on the G. And then we're going to go to that C5 again. So you see this index finger here? It's going to collapse and slide up to the 3rd fret. And we're only going to play the G, C, and E strings. So if you're not perfect with the bar here on the A string, it doesn't really matter because we're not playing it yet. And so that measures a little bit more of a doozy. Should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And so now that you can get a good idea of how the verse is really starting to work, let's hear what measures 11, 12, 13, and 14 sound like as a 4-bar phrase. Should be something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Now, this is tricky to play slow because it's so lyrical, so make sure you're getting comfortable with the muscle memory, and then it's okay to start speeding it up and start making it sound musical as you're learning it. It's not important for this to be perfect with the timing, it's more important for it to feel musical as you're playing it. From here we go on to measure 15. 15 is going to start off similar to some others in that we're not doing a lot to start. We're still holding that 3 on the E string with that C5 that we played on the previous bar. We're just letting it ring. And then we're going to play open on the G, then 3 on the A by making sure now this bar is collapsed on the E and A and good connections there on the A string. And then we're going to play 5 on the A with our ring finger. And then we're going to play that same alternate G7 that we did on measure 11. So that sounds like this in time. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Made a little mistake there, right? What I did was I played the 0 and I was like, oh, is it 5 or is it 3, right? It's easy to mix these up, especially when you're going slow. So it's really important to read the tab, get it comfortable, but then start speeding it up a little bit more as you're going, because usually that'll help you actually hear the melody. Let me go and try that again. I'm actually gonna play a little faster, see if that helps. 2 and 3 and 4 and... See how that sounds a little bit more natural? So we got to practice it slow to start getting the muscle memory. It's okay to speed up to start getting the music. From here we go on to measure 16. We're going to add the 7 on the A with the pinky again. We're going to play that 7 again. Then we're going to take the pinky off, and we're also going to have the ring finger come off so that we can play 3 on the A. Remember, we collapsed it there for that C5 chord, so we want to make sure we're getting a good tone there. And then we slide it up to the 5 on the A string along with the C and E. So this measure is actually exactly the same as what we played on measure 12. It's the same basic part. It's just a little bit different of a rhythm, a little bit different with some of the notes. The 7 goes to the 3 to the 5 when previously it went 7, 5, 3 to the 5. I know that's probably a little bit confusing, but just when you look at it, notice that they're very similar. That same sort of movement from 3 to 5 is really important. And as we go to the next measure here, well, let's hear that one in time. It should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going into the 17th measure, good news, it's exactly the same as the 13th measure. That little pull off, then the open and 2 on the A string. Exactly the same. So in time, that one's something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And we go into the last measure of this section, which is measure 18, and it's very similar to measure 14. We start with the same G7 sus4, same 5 up to the A string, same strum through the G7, and then it changes just a little bit. And the way it changes is this ring fingers can go up to 3 on the A string, and then you're going to take your index, move up to 2 on the G string, and strum through now all 4 strings to create this wonderful A minor chord. So measure 18 in time is something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And so that you can hear it, here's the whole verse. So this is measures 11 through 18. Again, it helps to play this lyrically. Don't try to follow the rhythm too closely if you know the song. Obviously, following the rhythm will give you success, but more success will be found if you try to hear it and try to emulate what you're hearing the melody. It should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Pretty neat, right? Now we go into the pre-chorus. This is just a little 4-bar line. We're going to play 3 on the A string with the index, and then 5 on the A string with the ring finger, 7 sliding the ring finger up, and then we're going to play that same F that we played earlier in the song, the 5-5 with the index barred across the 5th fret of the C, E, and A, pinky here to 8 on the A string. We're going to take the ring finger, play 7 on the A. Oh, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself, getting to the next bar. Just that bar there on 19 is just something like this in time. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Now we're going on to that measure 20. We're going to play that 7 that I mentioned a moment ago. Then the pinky on 8 of the E. And then we're going to play 5 on the A by taking that ring finger off, leaving that bar. And that measure 20 in time is something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And as we go into measure 21, we're going to go to an everyday A minor chord, just the index finger here on the second fret of the G string. And then we're going to move back up to the 3, 5, 7, to the 5, 5, 8, same way we played on measure 19 with our index, ring, ring, and pinky there. You can also alternatively use your pinky doubling up. It doesn't matter as long as you set up that 5, 5, 5, 8 with the index and pinky fingers. But measure 21 in time sounds something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And then we go into the last measure of the pre-chorus here on measure 22. 7 on the A string with the ring. 8 with the pinky on the E string. And then we're going to finger picking here. So we're going to pluck the 8 on the E string. And then we're going to take all the hands off. Open on the A. Open on the G, because it's actually going to go back into that section there. Now, before we get there, let's go ahead and hear what measure 22 sounds like in time. Again, remembering that when I go to that 8 on the E, it's a good transition point into the finger picking. It should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And here's the whole pre-chorus, starting with measure 19 through 22. Should sound like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And from here we go on to the chorus, and here's what's wonderful. This is all a repeat. There's nothing new here. The chorus measures 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30 are identical in every single way to measures 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. There's no difference whatsoever. So if you're comfortable with those, like what we mentioned earlier in the tutorial, you're good to go. And this is what that chorus is going to sound like now. If I play it through, it should be something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Pretty cool, right? From here, we go on to the bridge, which is this nice little 8-bar phrase. We're going to start by playing the 5 on the C and the 5 on the E together. So that's where we just were. We just were barred with that G7. We just hold that, take the ring finger off, play just the C and E strings together. Now we're going to finger pick right here. And then we're going to do this little muted strum. So just take your fretting fingers and just cover the strings very lightly. You don't want to compress, just lightly touch them and do a down strum. Create that nice little percussive pop. If this is challenging for you, totally fine to cut it out or do a chunk, whatever's easiest for you. But after I do that, I'm then going to switch to my thumb picking style. And I'm going to play open on the G, and then 3 on the A, which I'm going to use my index finger for, 5 on the A with my ring finger. So that measure 31 should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going into the 32nd measure here, we're going to play this wonderful C chord. Take your pinky, put it at the 7th fret of the A string, middle finger here on the 4th fret of the C, leaving your index where it was on the 3 of the E. Strum through all 4 strings. Stretch up to 8 on the A string. If you have to take something off, that's totally fine with that pinky. Go back down to 7. Then play open on the G. And finally, for the last chord of this measure, we're going to play this wonderful little F by just taking the index, sliding it down to 1, taking every other finger off, and making sure that we only hit the 1 on the E string, leaving the C and A strings open. So measure 32 in time sounds something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going into 33, we're going to play open on the C, 1 on the E, open on the A. Holding that chord, we're just plucking each one with our thumb. And then we're going to slide our ring finger up to the 7th fret of the E string. We're going to play the index finger here on the the 5th fret of the A string, right? So it goes 7, 5, and then the reason why I almost said 3 there is these two fingers are going to slide down 2 frets. So I'm at 5 on the E and 3 on the A, and then my middle finger is going to stack over to the 5th fret of the C string. I'm going to play my 5, 5, and 3. Again, angling the fingers towards the right shoulder if you're a right-handed player like me is really helpful. If you're lefty, obviously it's the left shoulder. And we're going to strum through all 3 of those strings, the C, E, and A together. So that measure 33 sounds and looks something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... As we go into measure 34, we're going to hold this chord. We're going to play 5 on the C, 5 on the E, 3 on the A, strum through all 3, and then take the pinky and add it here on 5 of the A. Strum through all 3 again. Pretty straightforward measure once you're comfortable with it. In time, it should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And so that you can hear what those 4 bars now of the bridge, the first half of it should sound like something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going on to the 35th measure here, we're going to slide down to that G7 sus4 that we played earlier in the song. Middle finger here on the 2nd fret of the C string, index here on the 1st fret of the E, ring finger here on the 3rd fret of the A, strum through all 4 strings. Play just the G, and then just the E and A, and then do a little chunk or a mute, just like we did before. So it goes. So if you want, you can strum through, then go to finger picking, play the G, and then the E and the A, and then do the little mute, and then use that as a transition back to the thumb picking by playing open on the G, 3 on the A, and 5 on the A, going back to that thumb. So it's a nice little transition technique of going between thumb, finger picking, little strum, and back to the thumb. In time, that should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Oh, I messed up there. Why did I mess that up? Well, it's because I'm thinking so much about going from the little muted pop to the finger picking or the thumb picking. Which one do I do? This is why it's really important to have really good intentions when you're working on this part. So let me try that again. I'm going to say the technique I'm doing as I'm doing it so that you can really see the transitions. I'm going to do thumb, finger picking, muted, back to the thumb. Much better. Let's try that in time. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going into the 36th measure, it's exactly the same as what we played on the 32nd measure. Pretty cool, right? So in time 36, identical to 32, that same C here, same F down low. In time, that should sound like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going to the 37th measure, we're going to play 2 on the A with the middle finger, and then 3 on the A with the ring finger. Slide all the way up the pinky to the 10th fret of the A string. Play that by itself. Take the index barred across the 7th fret, and then take the middle finger, add it on the 8th fret of the E string. So we have 7, 7, 8, 10 for this G sus4. Play through all 4 strings. So that measure 37 sounds something like this in time. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going into the last measure of this bridge section, we're going to pluck the C, and I like to go to finger picking here, transition, because we're going to be going back in towards finger picking. So we play 7, 8, 10, and then we're going to take this middle finger off and pluck our G, C, and E together. So that measure in time is something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And here's that 4-bar phrase now, 35 through the end of this bridge section. It should sound like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... we transition back to the finger picking by the time we pluck that 7-7-7 because of what comes next. But before we get there, let's hear what the whole bridge sounds like. Measures 31 through 38. Should be something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now from this point, well, you already know what to play because the outro to this song, measures 39 through 47, is all review for the most part. We start with 39 playing it exactly the same as measure 1, and we play 40 the same as 2, 41 the same as 3, 42 the same as 4, 43 the same as 5, 44 the same as 6, 45 the same as 7, and 46 the exact same way as 8, except we hold the very last note. That's the only change. It's the same as 1 through 8, except the last note we play, we hold. It sounds something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and. So I'm holding that last note. If you're looking at the tab, that's called a fermata. What it means is we just hold that note, add some dramaticism, because then for the very last measure of the song, on measure 47, we play that same C5 chord that we played to start the verse. 0, 0, 3, 3, index finger barred across the 3rd fret of the E and the A strings. We take our thumb and we strum through it. And that's it. That's the whole end of the song. That measure, obviously very simple in time, as 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So let's go ahead and hear this outro again, right? So this is the same thing as measures 1 through 8. Hold the last note and play this to end this beautiful piece. Should sound like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and. And now I'm going to bring the camera back up to me. There you have it. This is a wonderful piece of music to play. I will say this intro part is really addicting. It just sounds good. You get that rich harmony part of the finger picking underneath with the nice melody on top. And so it translates really well to the high G ukulele for that reason. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. And I'll look forward to seeing you here for the next lesson on Rock Class 101. Thanks so much.
All right, guys, so this week's ukulele lesson was a lot of fun. This is a gorgeous love song, and we are releasing this lesson right before Valentine's Day, so the timing couldn't be any better. Now, I wanted to give you a friendly reminder that if you did want to get the tabs to print off and keep for your records, that was available at this link right here. Or you can go to the site rockclass101.com and do a search for Right Here Waiting. Now also on that page was the really cool interactive on-screen tab viewer, so you can literally hit play, watch that tab scroll across in real time, highlight bars to loop sections, slow it down, all that fun jazz. So guys, again, I hope you enjoyed learning this tune, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.